start? Okay. This next test will cover cranial nerves, and then spinal cord, spinal nerves, and autonomic nervous system. That was another set of notes, right? And then heart, vessels, blood. Okay. I think that's right. Yeah. So any questions? Everybody doing okay? How's lab going? The heart lab's really easy. Yeah, that's what that looks like. Okay. And if you guys didn't have a chance, will you take a minute today to do that survey, that little 7-question survey? Just because I'm going to be deciding next week what people are required to buy for fall. And it's nice to have your opinion because you're the ones who do it. And especially if you use something that we didn't tell you about, like some of you guys use specific flashcards, some of you use coloring books, some of you use certain websites. It's nice for us to know what you find useful and relevant. Okay, so we are going to start where we left off last time, which was, I think we finished the head, right? Isn't that what we did? We finished blood flow to and from the head. So let's just review just a little bit. Okay, so the vast majority of the arterial flow to the head comes from where? The common carotids, internal carotids. So if you just said brain, it would be internal carotids. The whole head is like common, right? Okay, so the blood flow to the brain is primarily through the internal carotid arteries, the pair of them, and then what other artery? What gives the rest of the blood supply to the brain? Yeah, the vertebral arteries, the left and right vertebral arteries, which are a branch off of the subclavian arteries. That makes sense? Okay. Blood from the brain drains into what vessels? Yeah, the internal jugular veins, right, which join with the external jugular vein dumps into the subclavian. And then do you remember how you form the superior vena cava? Do you remember how you form it? So, can't reach that one. Hold on. So if you're going to form the superior vena cava, you're going to do it by gathering up, you're going to gather up the internal jugular vein from the inside of the head, right? The external jugular dumps into the subclavian, right? After you've gathered up all of the blood from the head and the arm, it forms this vessel. What's that one? What's this one? That's the brachiocephalic vein. You've got 2 of them. And then remember, your 2 brachiocephalic veins will join to become your superior vena cava. Does that sound familiar? Okay. All right. So on Friday, you guys are going to start doing blood traces, or next week, whenever you have lab, blood traces, and some of them will involve this kind of stuff that we're doing today. Okay. So a little bit more review before we go on. So what we were doing is we were delivering blood from the aorta to all of the organs it gets to in order. So first question is, what is the first systemic organ that gets blood supply from the aorta? The heart. And then what? Head, arms, right? The entire head, including the brain, and the arms, right? But we haven't done the arms yet. So that's what we're going to do now, right? We are going to deliver arterial blood to the arms and then bring it back. You may notice that what your textbook does is does all of the arteries and then all of the veins. That doesn't make sense to me. So if you want for people to understand blood flow patterns and not just do memorization, you deliver blood to and then you drain blood from. So a lot of times you'll see that the things aren't on the same page. But I'm just doing it the way that makes conceptual sense to me. Okay, so arterial supply to the upper limb. So what we are going to do is we're going to continue the story that we started before. And if you want to get blood supply to the upper limb and the shoulder, you have to do it via the subclavian artery. Yeah? But how do you get to subclavian on the right side versus the left side? Right side. Brachiocephalic, then subclavian. From the aortic arch to the brachiocephalic to subclavian. And the left side, what? Aortic arch to subclavian directly. After you get there, it doesn't matter, right? It's the same after you get there. So once you're in the subclavian, why is it called subclavian? Because it goes under the clavicle, right? Okay, then arterial flow to the arm is so flippin' easy. It's like exactly what you would expect it to be, because you don't even have to know most of the little vessels. So here's arterial supply to the arm. Subclavian up there. After it runs into the armpit, it's called axillary, right? After it runs through the arm, it's called brachial. What do you think this vessel is called? Radial. And that one? Ulnar, exactly, right? And the radial and the ulnar form this little anastomoses. They actually form two of them. You don't usually get named those, but let's just acknowledge that you do have blood flow to your hand, okay? This one is called the superficial palmar arch, and then there's another arch on this side. Both of them are anastomoses of the radial and the ulnar arteries. And then they give rise to the digital arteries. That's clinically relevant, of course, because if you do a finger prick for glucose, the capillaries there would be supplied by the digital arteries, right? Okay, so easy, right? Super duper easy. Okay, now the venous drainage is not quite as easy because there's both superficial and deep venous drainage, right? It's not that bad, really. It looks confusing at first, but it's all right. Okay, so with venous drainage, first thing is, again, it should make sense to you that your arteries are not going to be superficial vessels. You do have superficial veins, right? And you can see some of them. This is all venous flow. And you also have deep. So for instance, if I was getting blood to the capillaries in my skin, then I would drain from the superficial, right? But if I was getting blood to the musculature in my forearm, I would have deep arterial flow and deep drainage, right? So the only challenge with the arm is like when you do a blood trace next week, you have to you have to read the question. Like, are you doing a superficial trace or a deep trace? And then the other issue is that the pictures make it really hard to see what's superficial and deep. So the best that they came up with is that the superficial vessels are lighter in color. I mean, they're not, just so you know. But superficial vessels are lighter in color. But it's still pretty damn easy. So let's just look at what is actually happening. So we got blood all the way to the fingertips. Let's get it back superficial, and then let's get it back deep. Ready? Okay, so even though they didn't tell you what these are called, what do you think these veins are called? Yeah, those are the digital veins. And the digital veins go up and dump into two different sets of arches. One of the sets of arches is superficial, right? And the other one's deep, so you don't really see that one, right? This one's like sort of the deep within the palm of the hand. So strangely enough, they call it the superficial palmar venous arch on this side, but it's really not very superficial compared to this one, right? The dorsal one is the one that you can see on this side. You can see all of those vessels. So let's follow that one up, because that one's the superficial one, right? So the dorsal venous arch will go up and dump into these two parallel veins that are superficial on the lateral side and superficial on the medial side. Okay, got one big one that goes up the medial side. That's called the Basilic Vein. And the one that's going up the lateral side is called the Cephalic Vein. So you got B and C. So you can go B, C from the body, or you can remember that this one's on the boob side, which is what most people do, right? Basilic on the boob side. Okay, so the basilic and the cephalic. You've got some anastomoses between them, and it's pretty variable, but the one that's pretty consistent is this one, and that's clinically relevant. The median cubital vein, right? Because it's a really common site of blood draws, it's a really common site of IVs, right? And it's really easy to get to, right there. So this is the median cubital. Sometimes it's also called the median antecubital. That's fine too. So the basilic. Now the basilic goes all the way up, and it really dumps wherever the hell it pleases. But this is the most common pattern, is that it dumps somewhere into either the brachial or the axillary vein. Okay? But every once in a while it'll dump right here, and sometimes it goes past and dumps into the subclavian. Because there's lots and lots of variation in superficial drainage patterns. A ton of it. So FYI, with this kind of variation, it's not particularly anatomically important, right? So I don't nitpick you about it when it's not anatomically important. So this is what it usually is, okay? And then this one, which is the cephalic, goes up, and it usually dumps either into the axillary or into the subclavian. It dumps somewhere up there. But ultimately what they're doing is they're all gathering together, right? And all of that superficial blood is going to end up in the subclavian vein and then get it back to the inferior vena cava. Subclavian, then what? Yeah, then brachiocephalic after you gather up the stuff from the head, right? Brachiocephalic. And then from brachiocephalic, superior vena cava. Does that make sense? So that's the superficial drainage. It's not really very hard, is it? And these vessels are pretty easy to see on the cadavers as long as we saved them. They're really superficial, so if you're not careful when you're skinning, you'll pull them off. So you have to like pay attention to what you're doing. The deeper ones, it's really hard to damage on accident. Okay, so let's do the deep drainage now. So we are going to get blood from my fingers and from the muscles that are deep within the forearm all the way back up in. So again, you've got digitals, okay? These digitals are more anterior, and then those are going to dump into like a couple of different venous arches. You usually don't have to know those individually by name. So these guys are going to be on the palmar side, and then watch what those do. Those go up, and they go up into a pair of ulnar veins. You just have two, most people do, and a pair of radial veins. So ulnar veins on the medial side and radial veins on the lateral side, right? So blood is going up through those. And right about the time that they hit the elbow region, it stops from being 2 and 2 and it's 1 and 1. And now we've got 2 brachial veins that run with the 1 brachial artery. And those stay 2 for as long as they want. It's pretty variable. So usually it's 2 like halfway up or 3/4 of the way up. So those are called the brachial veins. And then the brachial veins are going to gather blood from these 2 superficial ones. Eventually they're going to become axillary. The axillary is going to become subclavian. Subclavian is going to become brachiocephalic into the inferior vena cava. Does that make sense? Okay. So, any questions? Okay. It's super logical. It's really easy, and you can see it in the cadaver as well. We've also got that 4G model. They call it 4G. It's like the circulatory system model. It's like that tall. And it's $4,000. That's why they call it a 4G. So don't break it, okay? It takes a lot for me to get the college to give up $4,000 to buy a new one. They're really nice because you can see all the vessels on them. Okay, so that's arterial supply and venous drainage. We did deep and superficial. Okay, so we're on our journey, our little magic school bus journey down the aorta. So now you can see that we did ascending aorta, aortic function. Now we're doing descending aorta. The descending aorta is thoracic and then abdominal. Okay, so the thoracic aorta doesn't have very many branches off of it because we already supplied most of the thoracic cavity, right? We already supplied the heart, and we supplied the vast majority of the lungs from pulmonary circulation. So it doesn't have very many big branches. Mostly what it does is gives rise to the intercostal arteries that deliver blood to the intercostal muscles and the ribs, right? So do you see those intercostal arteries? Okay, what else do you supply in there? These are not in the picture, but they're functionally important. You have a branch that you can't see, but should conceptually make sense, called the esophageal artery, which gives blood supply to the esophagus. Good? You have another branch which you can't see, but is conceptually important, and that is the bronchial arteries. And the bronchial arteries give blood supply to the parts of the respiratory system that aren't doing gas exchange with the air. Does it make sense that like the bronchioles and the external parts of the lungs would need systemic blood, not pulmonary blood? Does that make sense? So a little bit of the respiratory system, the parts that are not actually doing gas exchange with the air, get systemic blood. So that is basically what you're going to do. Now, you can learn the individual names of these intercostal arteries, but I think it's hard to see the depths on the picture. So I never ask them in lecture, just because like it's damn near impossible to get a picture that actually shows you whether you're looking at the anterior one or the posterior one. I mean, they do exist. Okay. Now, venous drainage of the thoracic cavity, everybody hates. It's not really that bad. It's just that it's weird and it's hard to see where things are going. So the venous drainage of the thoracic cavity is weird because it's all going to drain into the superior vena cava, but the superior vena cava is slightly right, just like the aorta is slightly left, right? That means that if you are going to drain the right side, you drain directly into the superior vena cava, but if you're going to drain the left side, you have to make a couple of jogs to get over there. So this is why this pattern is weird. And the sets of vessels that you're going to deal with are called azygous, and azygous means unpaired, like a zygote, right? So these are not paired vessels. It's not parallel between the left and the right. So let's do the easy part first. So the easy part starts here. So these are intercostal veins. That shouldn't be surprising to you at all, okay? And the intercostal veins on the right side will dump directly into this vessel, which is called the azygous vein. And the azygous will dump into the superior vena cava, okay? So the direction of blood flow, around, in, up, dump. Good? Okay. That's how you do the right side. But if you're doing the left side, you're going to have a couple more jogs to get over there. So watch the left side. If you're in the upper left ribs, this is generally how it goes. Intercostal, this little guy, which is called the accessory hemiazygos. And then that one goes down, up into the azygos, into the superior vena cava. Good? Yeah, watch. Intercostal, right? On the left side. That's your intercostal veins. This guy right here is called the accessory hemiazygos. And then that gathers the blood. It goes down into the azygos and then up into the superior vena cava. So it's a weird flow pattern and everybody hates it. Where do you see it? On the 4D models. That's the place that you can see it best. Okay? And then if you're in the lower area, these lower intercostal ones, they even have a different pattern still. So these intercostal ones right here, those dump into this guy, which is the hemiazygos. Hemiazygos goes behind and dumps into the azygos, which dumps into the superior vena cava. So what I would do if I were you to get this is draw arrows in it, in my book, right? Find where I'm going, find which direction things are going up into the superior vena cava. Because it's hard to see what things are doing without figuring out the blood flow patterns. So it's really not that bad. It just takes a little practice. That's all. Okay. So that is venous drainage of the thoracic cavity. And now we get into the part that is worth some attention, and you guys probably need a little help with. You don't even need me really to teach you blood flow through the arm because it's freaking easy, right? But when you're doing blood flow through the abdominal region, it's kind of complicated. So let's make sure that you get it, and then you'll be able to predict what happens and figure out the basic flow patterns and figure out when you're saying something that's incorrect. So first thing is, before we put in all the organs, let's just find the general locations of the biggest branches off of the abdominal aorta. So we went thoracic aorta, and then after you pass by the diaphragm, it's considered abdominal aorta, okay? And sometimes abdominal descending, just because that's the direction the blood's going. Good? Okay, so the big branches that you are going to see, and I want you to think not just about what the branches are called, but by the time we're done, you should know what the branches supply. Our objective will be to supply all the organs in the abdominal cavity, right? And then eventually in the pelvic cavity. Okay, so this first big branch immediately under the diaphragm right there is called the celiac trunk, okay? This one is going to supply a bunch of the organs that are right under the diaphragm. We'll talk about them in just a second. This next big branch right here is the superior mesenteric artery. The superior mesenteric artery is really easy to find because it's big and it's right smack in the middle, and it's usually kind of close to the renal arteries. It supplies, and this is the last time I'm going to tell you, it supplies the vast majority of the small intestine and the proximal portions of the large intestine. And it runs through the superior part of the mesentery. Do you remember what mesentery is? When you have like 2 layers of serous membranes, it is just holding the organ to the body wall, okay? And this guy right down here, this other big branch, is called the inferior mesenteric artery, and what it supplies is the rest of the large intestine, the distal portion of the large intestine, okay? And then if you can't figure out what these are, you should probably fail anatomy. What would you call those?
They're obviously long.
These are renal arteries. They're delivering blood directly to the kidneys, and the renal veins are going to go directly back. So those are big branches that generally people don't miss, the renal arteries and renal veins. Okay, so before we get into the details about what each of these do, this one's going to have multiple branches. This is probably the hardest arterial branch that you're going to run into. Let's do the easy ones first. So the rest of the branches you're going to be concerned about here. This one is called the suprarenal artery that delivers blood to the adrenal or suprarenal glands. On the left side, it usually goes direct, and on this side, for some reason, it usually goes into the diaphragm and back out. But again, it's not particularly important, right? Still suprarenal. And then these guys right here are called the gonadal arteries, unless you know the gender. This one's gender neutral, right? If you know the gender, you don't call it gonadal. You call it testicular arteries in the male, and you call it ovarian arteries in the female, right? And of course, which gender has a longer gonadal artery? The males, because the testicular, right? The testicles have to descend through the inguinal canal, and so does this artery during development. So it's going to be much longer in male. Okay, so they're not called gonadals if you actually know the gender. Okay, the rest of these little branches you're not even responsible for. So what I want to do is go back and figure out what the celiac trunk does, and then we'll do superior mesenteric and inferior mesenteric. And after we've delivered all of that blood, we'll drain it from the abdomen. Okay, so celiac trunk first. Okay, so the celiac trunk is going to split. It's also sometimes called the celiac artery. It's going to split and deliver blood. Again, I want you, instead of just memorizing what the branches are called, look at where they're going, and you'll be able to figure it out. So celiac trunk, immediately under the diaphragm, that's where the celiac trunk is going to give rise to this artery delivering blood to the spleen. And we're going to call that the splenic artery. Okay? It's going to give rise to this branch right here, going around the lesser curvature of the stomach from the left side. That's called the left gastric artery. It's delivering blood to the left side of the stomach. Does that make sense? Okay? And then it's got one more branch. So splenic, left gastric, and then this branch right here is going the direction of the liver. That's called the common hepatic artery because it's going to split, and you're going to need the branches in just a second. Okay? It's not only delivering blood to the liver, but the liver is part of its big job. Okay, so splenic, left gastric, common hepatic. The common hepatic has 3 branches that you need to know. One of them is going to the liver. That's called the hepatic artery proper or proper hepatic. Does that make sense? Okay. And when you can see them, it's kind of hard, but once the proper hepatic splits, it's the left and right hepatic. But a lot of times those are hard to find. Okay. So common hepatic, then once it goes to the liver by itself, it's hepatic artery proper. Okay. There's 2 other branches. Again, just look at where they go. This one curves around the stomach, the lesser curvature of the stomach from the right side. That's called the right gastric artery. And it forms an anastomosis with the left gastric artery, right? And they're delivering blood to the stomach. Does that make sense? Okay. Here's the right gastric coming off of the common hepatic. Good. And then we've got one more artery, and this one runs behind and delivers blood to the rest of the stomach from the backside and to the first portion of the small intestine. That artery right here is called the Gastroduodenal Artery because it's going to the stomach and the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. Gastroduodenal Artery. Okay, so now conceptually, tell me what organs the celiac trunk supplies. Stomach, liver, spleen, part of the small intestine. Good? Okay? Got it? Okay, so like I told you guys last time, identifying things at branch points is a good way to get them wrong. If you were looking at a cadaver and you're looking for the splenic artery, find the spleen and find the artery that comes from somewhere near the abdominal aorta and goes to the spleen, right? And you should be able to, hopefully at this point, tell an artery from a vein by rolling it in your fingers. Good? Okay, so celiac trunk and all the stuff that it supplies. Okay, the next branch we're going to do is the superior mesenteric. So let's look at the superior mesenteric. The superior mesenteric is easy to find on the abdominal aorta. It's not easy to find where it goes because it branches like tons. So let me tell you what the superior mesenteric artery does. It runs through the top part of the mesentery and it delivers arterial blood to the rest of the small intestine, everything but the duodenum, the entire rest of the small intestine, and the proximal portions of the large intestine. I don't know if you know the large intestine in order yet, but this is the ascending colon and transverse colon, and this is the order that the poop goes through it, right? So it's ascending, transverse, descending, sigmoid. So what this one does, you can see, is it's delivering blood to the ascending and the transverse colon. Do you see? Okay, so the rest of the small intestine, the ascending and transverse colon. Good? Okay, and then this is the inferior mesenteric artery, and that delivers blood to the rest of the digestive tract, whatever we have left. And what we have left is primarily just the descending and sigmoid colon. Good? Okay, so we are delivering blood to the entire abdominopelvic. I mean, there's some other branches that you didn't talk about, like the pancreatic and stuff, but they're branches off of these. Good? Okay, so same kind of conceptual question. Tell me what organs the superior mesenteric artery supplies. Ascending transverse colon and the rest of the small intestine that you didn't get with the gastroduodenal. Okay? And then what organs does the inferior mesenteric supply? Descending and sigmoid colon. Good? Okay. So what we just did is we successfully delivered blood to pretty much the entire abdomen, and we're going to drain it, but the drainage pattern is going to be weird. So first let's do the easy part of the drainage pattern, and then we'll do the complicated part. Obviously, ultimately, the stuff that is drained from the abdomen will end up in the inferior vena cava, because this is the inferior vena cava, right? The drainage pattern, this is renal vein, right? Runs right with the renal artery, and it drains directly into the inferior vena cava. This is the suprarenal vein. It is weird. Sometimes it dumps into the inferior vena cava, sometimes it dumps into the renal. I don't nitpick about like meaningless variations like that. It's pointless to do that. But the gonadal, apparently a long time ago in evolution, the right gonadal evolved to dump directly into the inferior vena cava, and in almost all of us, the left gonadal actually dumps into the renal. Again, it's not particularly meaningful. I don't really care that much, but it is true in almost everybody. Okay? And then what we see is in this entire story, you don't see any drainage of the intestines, right? You don't see that in that story. You don't see any drainage of the liver. And the reason is that the drainage of the intestines, the drainage of the liver, and the drainage of the spleen is weird. And it's weird for a reason. So let's talk about why it's weird. Okay, so what happens is the blood that you absorb from your small and your large intestine is really nutrient rich, yeah, because you did a lot of absorption of nutrients, but you also don't eat sterile food, so it's also potentially pathogen rich and toxin rich, okay? Have you guys ever done like a micro experiment in which you like swab and then grow up on a nutrient plate to see what the hell's in what you're eating? Yeah. It is not sterile and slightly disturbing, right? Okay, so the deal is all of that blood that's nice and nutrient rich, in order to protect the rest of the body, instead of sending it directly into the inferior vena cava, I send it through the liver first. Okay? So I take all of that blood that was absorbed from those places and send it to the liver for monitoring and cleansing before I send it back into circulation, which is why you don't see the inferior vena cava, you don't see the inferior mesenteric artery go directly into the inferior vena cava. You don't see it do that. Does that make sense? This system that we will see is called the hepatic portal system. And let me tell you what a portal system does. Here's the general circulation pattern that usually exists. Heart, arteries, arterioles, capillary bed, venules, veins, heart, right? But a portal system does this. Heart, arteries, arterioles, capillary bed, portal vessel, second capillary bed, venules, veins, heart. So with this, everything that's absorbed from your intestinal capillary beds does not go into circulation before it goes through your liver capillary beds. It's making it go in series, right? 2 capillary beds in series, okay? So that's weird. That also means that the liver is going to not just be delivered arterial blood, which is normal. It's also going to be delivered venous blood, right? You're going to have venous blood going to the liver, which is unusual. Okay, so what we are going to see in this situation is that this is called hepatic portal circulation. Do you see a chair? Back leg of the chair, seat of the chair, front leg of the chair. Do you see it? Okay. So this is a little hard to find in the cadavers, by the way. The best way to find it is to remove the intestines. then you just have to trust somebody that the vessel is coming from where it's coming from. In the newest male on Redwood campus, the intestines are removed, and you can see this really well. It's also in the older male, but like in order to see this, you have to like pull up the liver and smash down some of the intestines and find these great big vessels. They don't even look like vessels. They're so wide that they look like, I don't know, pieces of connective tissue or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what these are doing. So let's build our chair. So do you see the chair? I've got the chair. Okay. All right. So with each of these instances, I want to know what the vessel is called, but I also want to know what it's draining. Okay? So let's start with the seat of the chair. The blood is flowing through the seat of the chair that direction, and it's flowing from this organ. So what do you think this vessel's called? Splenic vein. Yes. This is the splenic vein, and from spleen. And we'll talk about why the spleen is involved in this story in a minute. Okay, now this one, see if you can remember, this is the vein that is draining the distal part of the colon, okay? What was the artery supplying the distal part of the colon called? Inferior mesenteric artery. This is the inferior mesenteric vein, and blood is flowing which direction through it? Up, okay? And it is draining the distal colon. That's the front leg. The back leg, I'll tell you what it's draining because they cut off most of it. Back leg of the chair is draining the vast majority of the small intestine and the proximal portions of the large intestine, the ascending and transverse colon. So what do you think this vein is called? Yeah, that's the superior mesenteric vein. Okay, and which direction is blood running through that? Up, yeah. Okay, and now once you get them all together, you get into the back of the chair right there. Okay, the back of the chair is called the hepatic portal vein. Which direction is blood moving through it? Up to where? To the liver capillary beds. Now, remember that the liver capillary beds are sinusoid capillaries? Do you remember those? What's the function of the sinusoid capillaries in that location? What? Yeah, it's not actually filtering. I know they refer to it as not pressure driven. It's monitoring the, what do you have? Yeah, you got big macrophages sitting around ready to gobble up anything funky that you absorb, right? So what's going to happen is you are delivering all of this venous blood to the liver from the bottom side, and it's going to slowly percolate through those wide sinusoid capillaries. And as it percolates through those sinusoid capillaries, you're going to cleanse the blood, right? And so as it's moving from the bottom to the top of the liver, what happens is, so let's draw the liver on here, and then you go out the top side of the liver. These vessels that are going out the top side of the liver, so this is the hepatic portal vein, yeah? You go through the liver, and then those two vessels on the top are called hepatic veins, not hepatic portal veins, hepatic veins. So these two are hepatic veins. And they deliver blood into what vessel? Yeah, the IVC, the inferior vena cava. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So I want to talk about the function of this so that you understand it completely. This is one of my favorites, by the way, FYI. I love hepatic portal circulation because it makes anatomy make sense in the context of physiology. It's like an interesting story that in the context of physiology. So I could anatomically dump directly into the inferior vena cava with any of these vessels, but I don't. I go through the liver and then back up here. But I want to acknowledge one other thing. This is delivering venous blood to the liver. But the liver can't live on venous blood alone, right? So the liver, of course, also gets arterial blood, right? So the liver is getting blood in a common capillary bed from veins and arteries. And by the way, it dumps into that capillary bed and it mixes up the gas and oxygen content as it's in there, because you got one capillary bed, not two, in the liver. So what I want to do is I want to get you guys to think about why this is going on by doing just sort of an exercise in assessing how the blood is different in 3 different vessels. So we're going to do the hepatic artery proper, which is this guy right here. This hepatic artery proper, delivering arterial blood, okay? And then we are going to do 2 other vessels. The 2 other vessels are the hepatic portal veins and the hepatic vein. What I want to do is I want to compare them on 3 criteria. I want to compare them on gas content, meaning where is oxygen, carbon dioxide, high, low. I want to compare them in nutrient content. Where are you going to have boatloads of nutrients? And toxins and pathogens. Okay, you ready? So, of these 3 vessels, which one has distinctly different gas content than the other ones? Yeah, the hepatic artery proper. It's high what, low what? High oxygen, low CO2. So this is delivering the oxygenated blood, yes? Okay, and these 2 are exactly the opposite, right? Low oxygen, high carbon dioxide. Low oxygen, high carbon dioxide. So this is where you're actually getting your oxygen to the liver. Okay, nutrient content. Of these 3 vessels, which one has distinctly the highest nutrient content? Not the artery. Not hepatic vein. Which one just did absorption? Yeah, the portal vein. So this one has the highest nutrient content, right? Highest nutrient content. And then the hepatic vein is probably going to be almost as high, maybe slightly lower, only because it gets dibs on nutrients, right? It's like you feed the liver as you're going through it, right? So this is pretty high. So let's just say pretty high. And this is actually on the back side of circulation. So you can argue that it's medium or low, but it's definitely not as high as the hepatic portal vein where you just did absorption. Does that make sense? So the hepatic portal vein is actually the highest in the entire body because it's got absorption from the small intestine, which is where most of it goes on, but you also absorb some nutrients from the large intestine as well. Okay, so the highest nutrient content. So this is not low, but it's medium. Okay, toxins and pathogens. Of these 3 vessels, which one has distinctly the highest toxin and pathogen, potentially, concentration? Yeah, this is the hepatic portal vein, yes? And what do you hope will be true in the hepatic vein? Should be low. And this one, I don't know, medium? Not particularly high, not especially low, right? Maybe low. So do you see what's going on? You see what's going on as you go through the capillary beds, you are, of course, gobbling up the oxygen and generating carbon dioxide. But as you go through the capillary beds, you are also changing the nutrient content, but only a little bit. You're changing the pathogen and toxin content really dramatically. That's the whole point of the hepatic portal circulation. Everybody okay with that? Okay. So the last part of our story that we need to tell is just what about the rest of the aorta? And of course, we haven't supplied the junk right here, and we haven't supplied the legs yet. That's all we have left to do, is to supply the pelvic cavity and the legs. And so how are you going to get blood there? Okay, so notice when you go down, we've done celiac trunk, superior and inferior mesenteric, and we're going to split at the distal end of the abdominal aorta into the left and right common iliac arteries. Why are they called iliac? Because they're running by the ilium, right, that bone, okay? And then the common iliacs will split into the internal iliacs and the external iliacs. Yes? Okay, let's talk about what the internal iliac supplies. I hate the textbook picture of the internal iliac, but if I can orient you, I can make you figure it out. So here's the common iliac. And the reason I hate this one is because it's like, it took me a minute to figure out what the hell I was looking at. You're looking at the medial surface of the right os coxa, right? So this branch right here is the internal iliac. You don't have to know all of the branches off of the internal iliac, but if you look at it, it sort of shows you what it's supplying. Yeah. Vaginal, middle rectal, inferior gluteal, pudendal, uterine. So it's supplying the vast majority of the pelvic cavity. Does that make sense? Okay, that's what the inferior iliac does. I'm sorry, internal iliac, yes, internal iliac does. Good? Okay, and then the external iliac artery supplies the leg, thigh and leg, and also the external genitalia, because we didn't do that yet. Okay, so let's look at that one. It's not hard either. Okay, so external iliac artery, it's still external until it goes past the inguinal canal. And then once you get in here, it's generally going to be called the femoral, as it runs through the thigh. Not hard at all. You don't even have to know this little one over here. But the femoral artery, as it runs behind the knee, it's called popliteal artery, right? And then it will split. So just watch the split. You remember which bone is lateral versus medial? Which one's medial? Yeah, tibia fibula. So just keep that in mind, because as it extends down and goes down the back side, it's the posterior tibial. As one runs around and gives rise to blood supply on the front side, medial, it's anterior tibial. And then there's a branch off of the posterior tibial that goes lateral, and that's the fibular. Super easy. Go ahead.
So the femoral artery, like once it goes behind the knee, it becomes a popliteal.
Yeah.
It's the same point, just turns into
yeah, popliteal. Yeah, exactly. And by the way, if you were a true anatomist, it's actually called the popliteal after certain things branch off of it. But considering you don't have to know those things, right, then you call it popliteal when it's behind the knee, right? Okay. So everybody okay with that? Yeah. Super easy. And you don't. I don't think I put this on your lab list, but you do get blood supply to your feet, and it's not that freaking hard to figure out. You've got this big blood vessel that runs along that side and it makes arches, and then it gives rise to digitals, right? So it's a really parallel kind of thing of what you had in the hand, right? Okay, so venous drainage of the leg. It's pretty much what you would expect, with the exception of the fact that there's two superficial veins that you will have to know. So it's always going to be a little weirder because you have more veins than you do arteries, but once you do process of elimination and do the superficial ones, then the deep ones are pretty easy. As far as the superficial drainage, the dorsal venous arch, it's pretty superficial. Those vessels on the top of your feet, you can see them, right? You can see those vessels. So you got digitals, you got the dorsal venous arch, but then follow that up. That's going to go up here. Can't see this one very well, but this big honker right here is the longest vein in the body, and it runs just anterior to the medial malleolus. And that's called the great saphenous vein or the greater saphenous vein, just depending on which textbook you look at. Great saphenous. This one is clinically important because it's a really common vein that they use for bypass surgeries. Because you can take a chunk out of it and it's still enough that you can put it right back together. Take a chunk out. And then when you have multiple bypasses, they will just take the whole damn thing out. And you're like, oh my gosh, why can you do that? Because you've got way more veins than you need. It's fine, figure it out. Okay? So this is the great saphenous. Now this one's usually hard to find, and I don't remember how many cadavers we have it dissected out on. But this guy right here that runs superficial along the back side of the leg and dumps into the popliteal vein, this one right here is called the small saphenous vein. So great and small saphenous. Those are the only superficial ones you learn in the leg. Okay? And then the rest of it's really easy. The only weird thing is that a lot of times you have one artery and two veins, but they're named for exactly where they are. It's no big deal. So I've got some digital veins. I'm looking at the backside. Digital veins dumping into a different arch. You don't have to know the name of the arch. And then watch what happens. I've got a pair of vessels that runs up lateral and a pair that runs medial. Okay, so the lateral ones are called the fibular veins. Okay, and they will dump right about the popliteal. Okay, you've got a pair that run up the backside. These guys right here are the posterior tibial, and they dump about the popliteal. Okay, And then I've got a pair that runs up this front side right here that dump about the same place, and that's the anterior tibial, right? All dumping into the popliteal. Super logical. And then you move up. After you get past here, it's called the femoral. Usually the great saphenous dumps into the femoral. Sometimes it can dump a little higher up or a little lower. It doesn't really matter. And then the femoral is called the external iliac after you've gathered up all the blood. So once you get into like the inguinal region, it's no longer just femoral, it's external iliac. And then when does it become common iliac? Well, when you dump the internal iliac into it. Then it becomes common iliac, and then the two common iliacs will unite to form what? Inferior vena cava, right? So blood flow, to me, if you learned the names of things, if you learned popliteal, if you learned iliac, if you learned femoral, if you know where the fibula is and the tibia, it's not that freaking hard. It's like, yep, that's exactly what I expected. Unfortunately, that makes it pretty damn boring to teach. Like, okay, it ain't hard, but I am bored. Fine, you get to pick one. You can either be entertained or confused. Okay. So arterial supply to the pelvis and lower limb, we got that. We got venous drainage. Okay, we didn't have time for fetal circulation in the other class, but we can finish this today with you guys. Fetal circulation doesn't take that long. Okay, so fetal circulation is really interesting. It's my other favorite. So I have four favorites as far as blood flow patterns. Brain, heart, okay? Hepatic portal circulation, and fetal. Those are my favorites. Because all of them are interesting, meaningful. Okay, fetal circulation I think is really interesting. You will have to practice it on your own in order to get the pattern, and I have to draw in arrows in order to get it as well. But I did put in an image for you guys to practice with, right? Your fetal circulation. Where is it? Didn't I? Do you have one in your figure? Yeah, there it is. Okay, so you can practice with that one, but let me go through it with you. And so you can see why it's different, why it's weird, hopefully why I think it's interesting. Okay, but first, of course, we have to define some terminology. Utah being an abstinence-only education state means that people don't know a damn thing about the reproductive system, right? You can get pregnant before you understand what the parts are called. It's tragic. So first off, although this will be over-explaining for some of you, for some of you it won't, I need to tell you what a placenta is and how it's connected to the fetus, okay? Because a lot of people think it's actually the amniotic sacs and it's a different structure that we're talking about. Okay, so when fertilization occurs, implantation can occur in the wall of the uterus. You know that. But what happens when implantation occurs is that you start developing a really thick vascular disc attached to the wall of the uterus, and it's called the placenta. But the placenta is a weird structure because it's sort of part fetal and part maternal. Because what happens in the maternal part is when you get pregnant and implantation occurs, you start going through angiogenesis and developing boatloads of extra capillaries because you're going to have a lot of work to do, right? So you have the maternal capillaries, and this is important. And then the fetus actually, at some point, will start developing fetal capillaries. And what I want is I want those capillaries to be able to do gas and nutrient and waste exchange, but they sure as hell can't be attached to one another. Why can't they be attached to one another?
Because then the baby would never make it out.
The baby wouldn't make it out. The blood types aren't the same. This is a different person, right? So what you need is you need them snuggled up to one another, all wound close to each other, but never continuous blood flow between them. Does that make sense? So you need lots and lots of highly branched capillaries, fetal and maternal, okay? Now when the baby is born, what happens is the fetal part pulls away from the maternal part, and there's a lot of bleeding associated with it, right? These two capillary beds are really cuddled up to one another, okay? So that structure is this weird looking thing called the placenta. Have you guys ever seen a placenta? I'm trying to get one of my students to bring me in one, right? She works for an OBGYN, and I'm like, I really want one. Oh yeah, you're going to have a picture soon. Will you ask your wife if I can have hers? Is that weird? Yes, it's weird. Well, the school I taught at before, we had like a whole set, like that people could actually look at the structures. It's really weird looking. So this is fetal circulation. I want you to imagine that this is snuggled up by a big old uterus. Okay, so there's a uterus around it. This is the site at which implantation occurred. What is the amniotic sac related to this? The amniotic sac is going to be within the uterus surrounding the baby, right? It's a sac that's surrounding the baby. They're little aquatic animals for a while. So I want to talk about blood flow to and from the baby and what happens. So the deal with, of course, fetal and maternal blood flow is the fetus needs you to deliver it everything that it can't deliver itself because it's not eating yet, right? So you have to deliver it nutrients. And it's not breathing yet, so you have to deliver it oxygen and get rid of its carbon dioxide that it produces by way of its cellular respiration, okay? So what we are going to have is we're going to have a weird blood flow pattern. So the placenta is the place, and if you just want to think about oxygen as we go through, you can sort of see how things are going to change. What happens is the mom, we hope she's healthy enough to deliver adequate amounts of oxygen to her uterus, right? And when she does that, the maternal capillary beds delivering high oxygen right next to the fetal capillary beds, oxygen is lipid soluble and it will move straight into the fetal capillary beds. When it moves straight into the fetal capillary beds, it gets picked up by the placenta. And then it's going to start moving up this big red vessel right here to the baby's belly button, right? It's not a very cute belly button when you take the skin off, but just imagine there's skin on there, right? The belly button is right here, the umbilicus. This vessel, the red one right here, is called the umbilical, not artery, vein, because it's delivering blood back toward the fetal heart. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is the umbilical vein right here. So let's follow blood through. Okay. So the umbilical vein is going to go into the belly button, the umbilicus, right? It's going to go into the baby. And it's going to go into this vessel right here. It's still called the umbilical vein. It's going to dump behind the liver into the inferior vena cava. So do you see why it's a vein? Okay. Then once it gets past the inferior vena cava, you're going to look at the blood flow pattern and see what the heck goes on here. So it's going to dump into the inferior vena cava. Now this is weird because you've just mixed oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. In fetal circulation, there's boatloads of blood mixing. How does the fetus compensate for the fact that like the efficiency of sending high oxygen blood to one place is compromised?
Super high heart rate?
Yes, very high heart rate, right? The fetus has a really, really high heart rate. Okay, so I'm going to deliver blood in here, and of course we know from the inferior vena cava they're going to get dumped into the right atrium. But there's no reason to treat the halves of the heart differently, okay? We need blood to the heart, we need blood to the lungs, we need blood to all the systemic organs, but we don't need different blood anywhere, right? Because the fetal lungs are not oxygenating blood, so we need systemic blood everywhere, right? Yeah? Okay, so how do we do that? Well, in addition to doing what the right side of the heart does, which is of course deliver blood to the lungs, you are also taking some of the blood that's in the right heart and delivering it through the foramen ovale to the left heart. So there's not a disproportionate amount of blood that's going to the lungs because we don't really need it to at this point. I mean, it does get blood. It doesn't get different blood, and it doesn't get as much as yours does, okay? So it's going to go through the foramen ovale, and then it would go into the left side, okay? And then these guys are going to pump blood, and as you push it up, there's one more time that you get exchange. You push blood into the aorta from the left side and into the pulmonary trunk from the right side, and there's one more opportunity for exchange, which is there's a little vessel that connects the aortic arch and the pulmonary trunk. When it's open, it's called the Ductus Arteriosus and allows for exchange between them again. Again, so you don't send a disproportionate amount of blood to the lungs when they're not doing anything special, okay? That's called the Ductus Arteriosus. When it closes, it leaves a little ligament that connects the two, and you guys probably learned that ligament in lab, did you? Ligamentum arteriosum. Yeah, ligamentum arteriosum. You can still see that in a healthy, in an adult heart. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now, in addition to delivering blood through the lungs, to the lungs primarily through the pulmonary trunk, I'm going to do all of systemic circulation from the aorta, right? So the baby is delivering all of this blood, brain first, heart first, then brain, then arms, then everything else, right? So in addition, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to deliver blood back to the placenta, right? for more gas and nutrient exchange. So in addition to doing whatever else the aorta does, okay, when you get down to the bottom of the aorta and you split into left and right common iliac arteries, okay, then you're going to split into the internal and the external iliacs. There is an extra branch off of your internal iliac arteries during fetal circulation. And this extra branch is umbilical veins, which are delivering blood back to where? Yeah, they're delivering blood back to the placenta. And they're delivering potentially high waste, high carbon dioxide blood back to the placenta so that you can drop off the carbon dioxide, drop off the waste products, pick up more oxygen, and then do it all again. That makes sense? Those are arteries, yes, because the whole thing is named with reference to the fetal heart. So it's an umbilical vein if it's going toward the fetal heart, right? It's an umbilical artery if it's going away from the fetal heart. Does that make conceptual sense to you? Even though the gas is weird, right? But that's one of the reasons why it's really important that you learn way before this that an artery is defined by the directionality of the blood flow. Does that make sense? Okay, so what happens to these structures as you, when you are born? Well, we know, and we'll talk about delivering the placenta and stuff in just a second. Okay, usually about the time that a baby takes his first breath, this closes. The foramen ovale closes and becomes the fossa ovalis. The pressure change is what closes it, and then usually it just knits up slowly, right? But the pressure change keeps it closed, right? So it's not like it's an instantaneous healing, but that pressure change keeps it closed. This Ductus Arteriosus usually takes 1 or 2 days to completely close. And when it closes, you get almost 100% oxygen content in systemic arterial blood, right? The oxygen content goes way up because you have a good separation of those two. That's usually about the time they'll send the baby home. They're like, oh, you got a good separation of your systemic and pulmonary blood flow. What about these other structures? These two right here, if you are really good at dissecting, you can find ligaments that are remnants of those in the inguinal region, and you can find a ligament that's remnant of that one behind the liver. In everybody. Is that okay? Okay, so the baby is born. The baby is born in the amniotic sac, generally speaking, or the amniotic sac breaks and then the baby is born. Although my 15-year-old daughter, I didn't give birth to her, but she was born in caul, like in the whole sac. She's like swimming around in there. Super weird. So we've got pictures of it. Okay, so let's deliver the baby. So at birth, the umbilical vessels are going to atrophy and become ligaments. It is super important in any kind of placental mammal to deliver the placenta as well. And the placenta has to come out completely intact, okay? So it's going to be bloody, and you can now see why it's bloody, right? In addition to the potential damage as it's coming out, even if there isn't any damage. You're going to pull 2 capillary beds apart from one another, okay? And you have to watch to make sure the mom doesn't bleed out. She generally doesn't because you clot pretty quickly right there. And then the baby is delivered, right? And when the baby is delivered, the umbilical cord is still attached to the placenta, which is inside, right? They cut the umbilical cord, right? And assuming that the baby's lungs are working properly, the baby can start to cry, or you can see it start to breathe, and it'll pink up right then. Cut the umbilical cord, but now what I have is the placenta is pulled away from the wall. It's no longer getting maternal blood. It's also no longer attached to the fetal circulation because you cut the umbilical cord. So what you have is a chunk of tissue that can start to die, right, in the uterus, right? And if you don't get it out, the woman will go septic, and she will probably die. So when the placenta is delivered, it's not like it's just delivered and you're like, yay, placenta. You have to like examine it really carefully to make sure that it has no portions missing from the placenta, whether it's your sister or your dog, right? Look at the placenta and make sure that it looks like it doesn't have any chunks left out. It's usually pretty easy to tell if like something stays stuck to the wall. So when the placenta is delivered, then the mom's like uterus will start to contract and reduce blood flow, and there's a bunch of hormones that are involved in that. And the ductus arteriosus closes in 1 to 2 days. Okay, so do you want to go through it one more time? Okay, we'll go through it one more time. Ready? Okay. So pick up oxygen from the, ultimately, by the way, it was supplied from the internal iliac arteries of the mom. They supplied the oxygen, right? Pick up oxygen from mom's bloodstream, but don't pick up mom's blood cells. And then deliver it into this vessel. What's this red vessel called? Umbilical vein, and it's running through the umbilical cord. And the umbilical cord does look like this. It usually has two arteries in one vein. So the umbilical vein is going to go up through the umbilicus or the belly button. It's still umbilical vein to here. It dumps into where? Inferior vena cava, and inferior vena cava dumps into the right atrium, right? What structure gives me exchange between the right and left atria? The foramen ovale, right? Okay. And then the blood goes from the atria to the ventricles, and then the ventricles contract, and I push blood into the pulmonary trunk and the aorta. What allows exchange between the pulmonary trunk and the aorta? Ductus Arteriosus, good, okay. Delivering blood to the lungs and a bunch of other places, and then I deliver blood into the aorta, go down into the descending aorta, branch into the common iliacs, and then into the internal iliacs, right? And then the branch of the internal iliacs that delivers blood back to the placenta is called what? Umbilical arteries. Delivers that low oxygen blood back to. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so if the mom's blood and baby's blood never really is the same, so why is there that problem with being like RH negative?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. We're going to talk about that with the blood chapter, but let's talk about it now. Okay, so you have antigens on the surface of your blood cells, and one of them is just RH factors, and RH is just do you have it if you're positive, or do you not? What can cause a problem is your immune system can't recognize the absence of antigens, but it can recognize the presence of foreign antigens. Okay, so where you run into a problem is if you have an RH negative woman who makes a baby with an RH positive man. Okay, then the baby's got a 50-50 shot of being positive from the dad. So if you have a pregnancy, RH negative mom, RH positive dad. Usually it's not the first pregnancy that causes the problem. What happens is when she delivers, there is always mixing because of the torn capillary beds. And then her immune system meets the RH positive, right? And then it's hypervigilant to RH positive the next time. So if there's any awareness, and I'm not saying there's zero exchange between fetal and maternal blood, but there should be very little, otherwise she's going to reject it. So if she becomes at all aware that the next pregnancy is RH positive, then she will launch a massive immune system response to it, and it will cause an early miscarriage. But luckily, we actually have RhoGAM, the RhoGAM shot, and the RhoGAM shot basically just masks the fetal antigens, the RH positive antigens. And so if you know that your partner is, it's only a problem if the mom is negative and the dad is positive. It's not a problem the other way around. But if you know that, because you can't recognize the absence of antigens, you can only recognize the presence of foreign antigens, then they'll shoot you up with RhoGAM. If they knew it in the first pregnancy, then they would shoot you up the whole time, right? But it's usually the second, third, fourth pregnancies are going to have high rate of miscarriage. So one of the many reasons for fetal or maternal care. A lot of times the miscarriage can occur really early, and you didn't know why you miscarried. Right? You didn't. A lot of times people don't even know they're pregnant until they miscarry. You can miscarry at 10, 12 weeks and not even know that you were pregnant. Okay, I will see you guys on Tuesday. Please look to see if I updated the notes before Tuesday because there was some stuff I might want to add or change in the notes for blood, but I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.